Beneath the freezing, opaque waters of the northern Europe lies one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. The Baltic Sea is a dark, turbulent graveyard of maritime history, its floor littered with the rotting wooden ribs of centuries-old galleons and the rusted hulls of World War II warships. But in the summer of 2011, a Swedish salvage crew stumbled upon something that defied every nautical chart and historical record. What they found, resting roughly 300 feet below the surface, was not a ship. It was a massive, 200-foot-wide geometric disk. It featured distinct, sharp edges, circular formations, and what appeared to be corridors. Most terrifying of all, stretching out for nearly 1,000 feet behind the object, was a deep, violently gouged trench in the seabed, exactly like a crash runway. The story of this incredible anomaly begins with a highly experienced commercial treasure hunting team based in Sweden. Their objective was strictly financial. The Baltic Sea is famously a gold mine for highly valuable, centuries-old sunken merchant ships, particularly those carrying intact crates of vintage champagne and cognac that can fetch astronomical prices at high-end auctions. Equipped with advanced side-scan sonar, the crew was systematically sweeping a designated sector of the seafloor between Sweden and Finland, mapping the dark abyss line by line. It was tedious, routine work. The crew was accustomed to the mundane sonar returns of natural rock outcroppings and the occasional scattering of shipwreck debris. But late one afternoon, a shape materialized on the sonar monitors that made the entire bridge go dead silent. The return echo showed a perfect, massive circle sitting unnaturally on the flat ocean floor. It lacked the chaotic, jagged debris field of a typical wooden shipwreck. Instead, it possessed structured 90-degree angles and strange ramp-like features. The initial reaction on the boat was total bewilderment, rapidly shifting into disbelief. The captain immediately ordered the ship to turn around and run the scan again, assuming it was a software glitch, a hardware malfunction, or a false echo bouncing off a thermal layer in the water. But the second pass painted the exact same impossible picture. It was real, it was massive, and it was entirely out of place. As the crew maneuvered their vessel directly over the anomaly to get a tighter reading, the mystery took a sudden, chilling turn. All of the ship's advanced electronic equipment began to fail. Satellite phones inexplicably dropped their signals, displaying no service in areas where they previously had clear connections. The live camera feeds flickered into violent static and went completely black. Even the primary navigation systems and depth sounders struggled to maintain a lock, throwing erratic error codes. The crew was thrust into a sudden, highly localized electronic blackout. Panic and confusion rippled through the bridge as engineers frantically checked breakers and power supplies, finding nothing mechanically wrong. When the crew eventually returned to port and leaked their sonar images and blackout stories to the public, the internet exploded. The anomaly became a global sensation overnight. Without a specific scientific classification, the media simply dubbed it the Baltic Sea anomaly. News networks, documentary crews, and conspiracy theorists descended on the story with relentless intensity. Theories spread like wildfire across forums and television broadcasts. Was it a crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft that had plunged into the ocean thousands of years ago? Was it a top-secret experimental anti-submarine weapon lost during the dark days of the Cold War? Or could it be the central turret of a sunken Prediluvian city that sank beneath the waves before recorded history? The crew quickly realized that staring at sonar prints and engaging in endless speculation would never solve the mystery. They needed physical, undeniable proof. They made the dangerous, logistically complex, and incredibly expensive decision to send a team of specialized deep-sea divers down to physically touch the object. Preparing for a 300-foot dive in the Baltic Sea is a nightmare of extreme survival logistics. This is not a recreational scuba dive in tropical waters. At that depth, the crushing water pressure is immense, capable of collapsing a human lung in seconds if ascent protocols are ignored. The temperatures hover brutally around 35 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to induce fatal hypothermia in minutes if a diver's dry suit suffers even a minor tear. Beyond the physical dangers, the mental pressure of the dive was immense. They were descending into absolute pitch-black water to examine an unmapped anomaly that had already caused strange electronic failures on the surface. They were stepping into the complete unknown. The descent was a slow plunge into an ink-black void. Visibility in the sediment-rich Baltic at 300 feet is practically zero. The fine, milky silt hangs in the water, turning the beams of their heavy-duty flashlights into diffused, glowing fog. As they finally reached the seafloor, the soft, yielding mud suddenly gave way to something massive, dense, and unnervingly hard. Illuminated by the pale light of their torches, the divers reported a scene that defied geological logic. They saw walls of smooth, soot-covered stone that looked as though it had been subjected to immense, furnace-level heat. They swam over circular formations, resembling heavily armored hatchways, and traced their thickly gloved hands along straight corridors meeting at precise angles. It felt like exploring the charred, fossilized skeleton of a submerged military bunker. To provide definitive proof to the world above, they needed to retrieve a physical piece of it. But extracting a sample at 300 feet in near-freezing darkness is an agonizing, physically exhausting task. Buoyancy control is precarious, and every swing of a hammer burns precious, limited oxygen. Fighting the biting cold, the thick silt, and the crushing pressure, the divers painstakingly chiseled off a few small, jagged fragments from the massive structure's outer shell. They secured the heavy stones in a salvage pouch, began their long, slow decompression ascent to avoid the bends, and finally broke the surface, bringing the only physical evidence of the anomaly into the daylight. For years, the mystery had been built entirely on imagination, fear, and low-resolution sonar. But those extracted stones were about to face the uncompromising, brutal reality of modern science. The samples were handed over to university geologists for intense microscopic analysis. If the object were a crashed spacecraft, a sunken military installation, or an ancient advanced civilization's machine, the mass spectrometer would reveal traces of titanium, aerospace-grade aluminum, or advanced synthetic composites. But the results were definitive, undeniable, and entirely natural. The samples were not metal. They were composed of granite, gneiss, and primarily basalt, a dark, incredibly dense volcanic rock. But finding volcanic basalt at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, a region completely devoid of active volcanoes or seismic magma faults, presented a massive puzzle. To solve it, scientists had to look deep into the Earth's geological history. The anomaly was not the result of advanced engineering. It was the product of the staggering, violent mathematics of the last ice age. Over 14,000 years ago, a colossal 2-mile-thick continental ice sheet covering northern Europe acted as a massive mechanical bulldozer. As this unimaginably heavy ice ground its way across the Scandinavian mountains, it tore up ancient volcanic bedrock and dragged it along its belly for hundreds of miles. When the global climate eventually warmed and the massive glaciers melted, the ice simply dropped this colossal boulder into the newly formed freezing waters of the Baltic Sea. The object is a monumental glacial erratic. The sharp 90-degree angles and corridors that fascinated the divers are actually natural geological fractures caused by the crushing immense weight of the ice. The scorch marks are simply deep-sea manganese nodules and black cyanobacteria that naturally thrive on underwater rocks, giving them a burnt, metallic appearance under a flashlight beam. And that 1,000-foot crash runway stretching behind it? It is a textbook example of ocean current scouring. The rock never crashed into the seabed. It was dropped from above. For millennia, incredibly powerful deep-water currents whipped around this massive, immovable boulder. This forced the water to accelerate around its edges, creating a highly localized vortex that slowly, patiently stripped away the soft sand behind it, carving a massive, sweeping shadow into the seafloor. The Baltic Sea. Anomaly is a breathtaking monument to the sheer power of nature. It proves that the Earth itself is the ultimate architect. We do not need to look to science fiction to find overwhelming, inexplicable power. We simply need to look at the deep time and silent forces that shaped our own planet. The anomaly is a tombstone of the Pleistocene epoch, a physical reminder of a time when mile-high walls of ice ruled the Earth, possessing the strength to move mountains and the patience to carve them into masterpieces. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed exploring this geological mystery and discovering how modern science shines a light on the world's greatest enigmas, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you on the next discovery. Goodbye.